What's up, wrestling fans? Two Bros Wrestling Show coming at you. What did I say? Through the power of wrestling magic or magic that is wrestling? I don't know. We're here. We're here. What's happening, fellas and gals and Kevin?
I don't know that I could follow that introduction other than to say thank you for joining and watching the Two Bros Wrestling Show. We have a very exciting topic tonight. We are pre-taping this, so we are going to forego our normal format. We're not going to hit the news, and therefore we're just going to get straight into our main event topic. But it is quite a main event topic that I know there's going to be a lot of hot take opinions on.
Oh,
So
you think? Yeah, because
head,
the internet wrestling community is a very reasonable group of people that don't have hot takes. They're and can converse civilly in chats. We'll be fine.
there is so much tribalism that is unnecessary. Most people do like pro wrestling, all flavors of it, but there are some that thinks that WWE can do no right and that AEW can do no wrong and vice versa. And we're here to say that's BS. We all know it is. I don't care what the gap
Mhm.
is between company number one and number two. There is no, and I don't care who's on a hot streak because that goes back and forth. There is no perfect
Mhm.
company, and there is no company that couldn't learn a thing or two from the competition, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. Three things that AEW could learn from WWE, as well as three things that WWE can learn from the competition and Tony Khan. So, Doug, you ready for this one?
I'm ready. What you got, Kevin? Slack it to me.
Let's start first with what AEW could learn from WWE. And I want to start there only because this one is a little bit easier than the other way around based on both the current hierarchy of who's number one, as well as honestly the last year or two of creative when WWE has been on more of a hot streak than AEW. Because I guess maybe set the stage that way. When AEW did first appear on the scene, not only did they provide a great alternative, they really couldn't do any wrong. They started hot, and it was at the tail end of the Vince McMahon era where he was doing so
Hmm.
many of the same things, which was growing old on people. And so, by comparison, it looked like AEW could teach WWE everything.
Everything.
And then, as would happen, wheels fall off, and Tony lost the plot, and he started on a down streak, as will happen. And this coincides with TKO, Vince McMahon being ousted, Triple H taking over, and a year and a half of just a hot streak by any, both creative, financially, however you want to measure it. WWE was the ones that could do no wrong. I think that's a little more even now. You know, Bloom's off that rose a little bit too. Tony's picked himself up a little bit, so I do think that we can have a more of a conversation of there's things that each could learn, but I still think that it's going to be way easier for most fans out there at this point to talk about what AEW could take from WWE, and
Hmm.
so I think we start where it's easiest.
Let's do it.
Learn that less can be more. Every PLE doesn't have to be 6 hours long. Divide your bigger events into two nights the way that WWE does. Don't give away as much on television at the expense of the upcoming pay-per-view just to have a hot angle to pop, the internet. Blood is effective, but nonstop blood can be desensitizing. I say all of that, and I know that's a lot, not just one thing, but it can all be packaged up under showing some restraint in your booking and in your planning. It doesn't have to be everything all the time. Less can be more.
Less can definitely be more because I've been thinking about this a lot, knowing the show is coming up, and because I watch a lot of Stevie Richards' show on YouTube where he talks about just different aspects of wrestling. He does these what went wrong, what went right things, and just does a lot of like breakdowns and just like a lot of commentary in general. And he talks about one of the things you learn as a wrestler, especially in WWE, when you think you're going too fast, slow down, and if you
Yeah.
still think you're going too fast, or you're going to, and when you get to that point where you think you're going too slow, slow down again. You know, I think that in a nutshell right there is what you're saying with AEW, what they could learn from the big dogs. Because, and I don't mean Roman Reigns, but you don't need. every throwaway match on TV throughout the week to be a pay-per-view level match. These poor guys are not going to have the careers that WWE stars have because they go all out, no pun intended, way too much on things that don't even matter. And then there's Tony's booking, and things do get out of hand. And my goodness, we've joked before about the 16-hour pay-per-views.
You burn out even your hottest crowds and your biggest
Yeah.
fans. Like it's too long. And WWE's learned this lesson. It has, I mean, at first I was skeptical of 2 night big events, but I see
Hmm.
the advantage of them now. I would much rather tune in to 2 nights of WrestleMania than a 7 hour WrestleMania. Um,
Yeah.
that by the end of, I'm just tired and want it to be over, quite
Yes.
honestly.
Yes.
And Tony does not yet know that. And I think that he can learn that. He can learn it in restraint in his booking. He can learn it in the applicable use of blood and not just
Hmm.
desensitizing people to it. And you mentioned in ring action. Yeah, let's talk about the in ring action too, without the selling, without just everything. When you have 20 guys sometimes in a match, 10 on 10s,
Yeah.
just chaos. He does all that too much. Tony is a maximalist, and sometimes he needs to be more of a
Absolutely.
minimalist.
I really wonder if Tony's brain is wired to think that every wrestling fan that he's making content for is like him. I think in WWE when Vince was there, it was really for an audience of one, and it's almost that way. I wonder if it's that way for AEW. It's for an audience of one who thinks he's many.
And if you've ever seen AEW live and actually seen Tony Khan live and not just on camera, this is a caffeinated dude. So maybe in
Yes.
his ADHD type
Right.
mind, it has to
Yeah. That's
be
what.
constant stimulation. And
Hmm.
maybe it is the audience of one when you're a billionaire with your own wrestling company, which is what got Vince too.
Hmm. Yeah. So slow down. Take a breath.
The number two thing that I believe that AEW could learn from WWE, and that is managing talent and shows. Obviously, the CM Punk issues in AEW have not repeated themselves yet, anyways, in
Hmm.
WWE. And WWE itself certainly has skeletons in their own closet as far as how talent relations have been handled. However, one doesn't have to think too hard about how a CM Punk backstage meltdown with others would be handled in the new Vince-less era of
Hmm.
corporate ownership in TKO. And I respect that the buck stops with Tony, but there are just way too many reports of Tony wanting to be everyone's friend and
Hmm.
and or a money mark overall, involved with every aspect of AEW. It makes it a poor decision, really, for him to be over the discipline of these men and women as well. As for managing the shows themselves, it's related that Tony is the Vince McMahon of
Hmm.
or related that he is the Vince McMahon essentially of his own company. There is no Vince McMahon in WWE anymore.
Right.
Not just literally, there is no Vince type character in WWE anymore. It's a business, and Tony is still running AEW the way that Vince ran WWE, and that says I'm a one man show. You do not hear as much about Raw being rescripted as the show goes on, or talent being
Hmm.
disgruntled for showing up to TV without having anything to do, not knowing if they'll be used or not, but just to show up. That used to be all the time during the latter Vince years. And now we hear that all the time about Tony, that these talents are showing up and saying, I had to fly to the city. It's 6 o'clock and we're writing the show. I mean, just look at the recent comments from Jake Hager. They were not very flattering as to the way that AEW is ran. I think Tony would be better trimming some talent cost, as hard as that might be, and investing that money into a support structure on the management and the creative side that took him further out of being the only one in charge of these things.
I gotta agree with that. Because there's just so much. I mean, the again, I think it goes back to this man's brain and the way he is wired. Constant stimulation is needed for him. I do believe because like seeing him live, he is wound up, right? Maybe he does think he can do everything, but we've talked about this before. WWE is a ancient in the world of wrestling at this point, right? They know how to handle. There are people still there that were there during Vince McMahon era, there when it was the WWF before it was even the WWE, and there are all these old school wrestlers that have come through there, and there's still enough talent there to know how to deal with CM Punks. Tony doesn't have that. Tony does not have that knowledge. I mean, this was a billionaire who got a bunch of toys. Not knocking Tony, but you know, he just got a
Uh,
bunch of toys and he doesn't know what to do with most of his toys now. Where Vince would buy toys just to put on the shelf so Tony couldn't get them at once upon a time. Now you've got so much talent in AEW that just kind of chills there and creative has nothing for them. And
yeah,
a
you
lot of
can't
a
do a
lot of
whole. I
management and
mean, you can't run
relations.
that schedule on your own, and not with two
Yeah.
companies, AEW and ROH, and all of those shows.
Hmm.
And you want your hand in everything. Honestly, it's never been explicitly said, but this is one of the reasons that Cody Rhodes left. Like, let's be honest, he didn't have the
Hmm.
same pull. You're hearing that right now about Chris Jericho, who may or may not be coming back to WWE, is that what once was someone who had Tony's ear, just the longer you're in that company, Tony just pushes people to the side and tries to do everything for himself and doesn't listen to others. And that is to his detriment. You can't do it by
Hmm.
yourself, and nor should you even try. You can't be everyone's best
No.
friend, or you can't be just running a business by intimidation. Either of those strategies as a boss are losing ones. He needs a support structure.
Yeah, there's no. Yeah, absolutely. Support structure, talent relations, somebody more than CD running around, in the back trying to deal with things.
Yeah,
Uh,
more writers. Yeah,
yes.
just the
Yes.
what WWE has, honestly, a smaller version of that would work wonders for Tony.
Yeah, I don't think, Tony doesn't need a writer's room where people are going, okay, here's your script for tonight. Let these people go old school like they do. Here are your bullet points. Talk about these things. Here's where the story goes. Here's the arc. Let's work this. But yeah, it structure really. It's what Tony needs.
It will take some giving up of control, and there's not been any evidence that he's willing to do that, but we will
Mm-mm.
see. For this last one, Doug, I think for me, what AEW could learn from WWE is a bit of a cheat, maybe for me on this one. And I say that because I think one thing that Tony can learn from WWE is actually from an older version of WWE and not the current version. And this is something I think could even give him a competitive advantage. We have talked a lot over the last few weeks about how the deal with both ESPN and then the deals with Netflix and just the
Hmm.
various broadcast and cable, like what all WWE has done to diversify where all their content is. This means that the effective death of what was the WWE network model, which to an extent carried over into Peacock era that just
Hmm.
ended a couple of weeks ago, and that is have everything or nearly everything in one place at an inexpensive price. WWE has
Hmm.
since started chasing the money and selling its right to different players, and AEW on the other hand has a broadcast partner in Warner Brothers Discovery, so all of their TVs under Warner Brothers. They operate one of the most popular streaming services out there at HBO Max. We just got the news within the last couple of weeks that the pay-per-views were finally going to be making their way over to HBO Max. But that announcement, quite honestly, left a lot to be desired, as we talked about on our last show. That's because one, it's a la carte pricing for pay-per-views is higher, a higher price point than expected, and also it doesn't fully capitalize on what Tony has as far as his wrestling library. The real history isn't the brief one of AEW; it is the giant Ring of Honor
Courage.
library, which goes back several decades, which is under a separate pay structure and a pay wall, as is the current Ring of
Hmm.
Honor television product. Tony should leverage his relationship with Warner Brothers Discovery to bring ROH AEW content together on HBO Max at an add-on price that's more affordable than what WWE fans will be ponying up to be on all the different subscription services there. He could give AEW fans something WWE fans used to have but now miss, and that's everything in one place at a reasonable cost.
And how many of those current WWE stars, could he also, pull you get more eyes with these WWE fans then who want to see like old school CM Punk in ROH. You can bring those fans back around to your product through that way. So many talents gone through ROH and on to bigger and better and bigger stages, brighter become brighter stars, and you could really leverage that too.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
not saying
it's a
give it
great.
away either.
No,
Just,
no, no, no.
just set a price below what it costs to add Netflix and
Hmm.
ESPN and a cable bill for USA and all the different things you now
Yeah.
have to follow WWE, and give them the old WWE network. Just make it Ring of Honor and AEW. You
Hmm.
have one partner that does both your TV and your streaming. It shouldn't be that hard to just undersell the competition and provide a better value and better fan service, because WWE fans miss the old WWE network and or Peacock of everything in one spot.
And Tony also has the ends right now to bring in foreign wrestling, bring in New Japan, bring in CMLL, or bring those wrestling companies in through something like that too, and get them more distribution on this side of the pond or this side of the border. There's a lot he could do there too to get more eyes on them, because again, how many old school wrestlers came from or went to Japan, and a lot of talent going through the Mexican and South American. Uh, I don't want to call it a machine, but the wrestling machine that exists there. Lots he could leverage there. You're absolutely right.
So Tony, we know you watched the show, or at least you did before Doug changed his name back to just Doug. Um,
Just
but
done with the
take these
tribalism.
lessons. We will not even charge you for them. They're free for you to take because it would improve AEW for us, the fans.
Make it better for everybody.
Now, Doug, let's shift gears, if you would, with me to what WWE could learn from AEW. And I saved this one for last because, as I mentioned a few years ago, when AEW was at its hottest, this would have been easier. But in truth, though, AEW's boom years are not the only ones that are in the rear view at this point. The 18-month or so hot streak that Triple H was on in the post-Vince era has also shown a few more
Mhm.
cracks in recent months. So there's definitely room for WWE to learn a thing or two that AEW does very well, and I think better than WWE. And I want to start with a low-hanging fruit that I think most people would agree with, and that is tag team wrestling.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
SmackDown has a decent tag team scene, but outside of going back to the era of the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, WWE, and even WWF before that were always considered big man territories, singles territories. Vince Senior even cared very little for tag team wrestling, so that's just kind of baked into this company's DNA. AEW, on the other hand, from the outset, have built shows and angles around a very solid tag team division. Some of the greatest matches in AEW's brief history have involved some combination of FTR, the Young Bucks, the Briscoes, LAX, Private Party, Top Flight. You can go on. WWE has enough talent to do it, but does it have the will to learn from AEW that tag teams are worth investing their time into?
I mean, we can't talk about tag teams in AEW without pointing out that two of literally the founding fathers are a tag team. But there's so much more appreciation for tag teams in AEW, where in WWE it's just like they throw a couple of random guys together from week to week, and let's see what happens. Or you get these vehicles for one person to make them better before you cut them loose and let them go as a solo act. That seems to be what it is for WWE, and what's been for the longest time. I think even it goes back to like one of the old school like a PlayStation, a SmackDown games where you're in a tag team first and you kind of go up through and then you kind of break off from the tag team because that's where you get your start. You know, it's almost like developmental for WWE. let's put you with somebody. Let's put you with a good hand and get you over, and get your reps up. Then we'll move you on to something bigger and better.
It's not like WWE doesn't have great tag teams. I
Right?
mean, the New Day, um, the Street Profits, DIY, one of the
Hmm.
greatest tag teams of all time. And
Yes.
you got the Motor City Machine Guns finally getting to WWE, and yet somehow they seem lesser than you might remember
Hmm.
them from previous promotions. And it has nothing to do with them or the talent that they bring. It is the fact they show up and are just suddenly ordinary or on every other
Yeah.
week or lose one, win one, disappear for a month. There's just not that investment in the talent they have. They could have as good, if not better, a tag division as AEW if they chose to push
Hmm.
it. It's not at all unreasonable when AEW would, you'd think about a pay per view main event easily being FTR versus the Briscoes in some of those classic matches, or the Young
Hmm.
Bucks in the main event in a tag match. Would you ever see DIY in the main event of a pay per view, or the young,
Right.
even the Usos or the Street Profits, or names that've been around for a long time in WWE? They're still not going to tag team in a main event on a PLE just because
Right.
WWE
Yeah.
does not care that much about tag wrestling.
So true.
Number two of what WWE could learn from AEW. And earlier I mentioned, I know it seems like I'm talking on both sides of my mouth here. Earlier I mentioned AEW overdoing the blood. It does. But it does have the advantage of using blood to make WWE look like less like a product for adults and one for children. I think there's a middle ground. I'm glad that WWE does allow blading now. I know that's changed. So, before you put that in the comments, I understand it's way better than it used to. I'm glad they are doing it sparingly. I think that they're smart with that. But what I don't understand is the number of instances where it should be used but isn't. So again, don't have it all the time, but then
Yeah.
just stop having as many hardcore matches, TLC matches, last man standing matches, etc. Those styles of matches in WWE, when they happen and they don't have blood or they're not overly violent, it makes it look like a less violent, a less vicious product than what AEW can offer, because these guys have training wheels on. Just have a normal match. If you're going to have Hell in a Cell, it probably should look like a Hell in a Cell match should look, and it probably should involve
Hmm.
blood. Use it sparingly, but use your gimmick matches just as sparingly. Keep those violent match types to a minimum so that you can use those bullets when they're really needed, and not just, hey, it's the time to have a TLC pay per view, and we'll have an Extreme Rules pay per view where 9 of the 10 matches have some stipulation, and maybe there will be blood in one of them. Probably not. Just
Hmm.
find that middle ground a little better.
Yeah, definitely does need to be that middle ground because we have an incredibly conservative when it comes to blood and guts, I guess you say, in WWE, and then you've got the AEW that is, well, they have a pay-per-view called Blood and Guts. So
Yeah, they do lean into it, and they do
yes.
use it as a differentiator. And it's less so for them to be able to do it now that WWE actually does allow blading. But I do think that there is a middle ground where WWE could come a little bit closer and Tony can calm it down a
Hmm.
little bit, and both products would be better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because, and like I said earlier, there's AEW guys. There's sometimes always on 10, maybe even go to like 12 or 15, and then WWE is very conservative with a lot, but could bring some middle ground there, especially like we were talking earlier in the Clash in Paris review, where you've got these two guys who hate each other. They don't need to lock up and go out there and wrestle. They need to beat the hell out of each other because they hate each other. That's what we need to see. If you're going to sell it like that, that's what you need to have going on in the match.
And that match, notably, as great as it was, and we didn't talk about it earlier. We talked about it last week.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Last week, I just really
We're
like
just
this
wearing the
Beatles
same
shirt.
shows.
Right.
No, that match was as great as it was. As much as they hit each other with objects, no one bled. which
Hmm.
again, you don't need it to be a gore fest. You don't need vampires of people drinking each other's blood, the kind of stuff that Tony does that's just like unnecessary. But some man gets hit upside the head with a shillelagh. It's not unreasonable to think that he might be busted open.
Yeah, you don't need to staple like things to people
That's not
you
what I'm
know,
suggesting here. Yeah, you're right. Just that middle
yeah.
ground of
Uh-huh. Leave the bed and nails at
yeah.
home, but
After 2 years of nothing else working, then you throw them in a cell, and then you have blood. That's what you do.
mhm.
Just keep those gimmick
Sure.
matches to a minimum.
Minimum.
That leads us to the final thing that I think that WWE could learn best
Yes,
from
sir.
AEW, and this one might be a controversial one to some, but that is learn the non WWE main event style. Hear me out. So Tony
Okay.
Khan's booking may not be as crisp and logical as it used to be, but the shows, as we said, it may be too darn long. They are. One thing though that Tony still gets right is the in-ring product. The
Hmm.
quality of the matches on both pay-per-view and TV tend to be high. Rarely do they have a dud show, which WWE can sometimes do. And part of that is just the creative freedom for the talent. And part of that is just allowing his better workers to reach the top of the card. Um, and when I say hear me out, I know John Cena, Roman Reigns are amazing superstars, characters. Neither is going to, though, to give you the kind of match that a Will Ospreay, a Swerve Strickland, or Hangman Page can deliver. And that's not to say that WWE's best workers can't main event. I understand you want to get your Roman Reigns and I mean, this is the company that gave us Hulk Hogan after all. Work rate is overrated sometimes when it comes to what
Hmm.
it takes to be a WWE superstar, but you can't have both. Um, you know, Seth Rollins obviously can deliver. Gunther is a recent main eventer. They have both shown that they are some of the better workers that can be featured on the top of the card. However, WWE just has way more of a recent history of good characters that are solid or
Hmm.
sometimes even negative workers get all the way to the top of the card um, and work that all too familiar WWE main event style, which tends to be a big man style where you end up out of the ring at a certain point, and brawl
Hmm.
over those characters in that style can work. That's where I say, hear me out. Obviously, they can work, but I just like to see more variety and work rate more consistently in the main events on PLE.
Yeah, it's a really good point. You're talking about work rate, and again, I think we get sometimes maybe lost because we see these all or nothing performances in AEW like on TV weekly, and maybe that spoils us, or we want to see more from a very formulaic uh WWE presentation. Again, I don't want to say they can't work like you're saying. I know that's not what you're saying, but I really wonder if there are like what the producers are. Are there producers in AEW? I mean, we clearly we have folks like putting together matches, but is that the Buck sitting down with FTR and going, okay, we're gonna do this, and this, and Christopher Daniels isn't sitting beside him going, okay, well, we need to get out at this time, and what is that like in AEW right now? Because just go back and watch I think it's the first episode of Real or whatever it is, the Netflix thing where it's like behind the scenes. It's totally
Unreal.
not staged in a reality. Yeah, Unreal. Excellent name for the show. But that where they go back to that CM Punk Seth Rollins match where poor Abyss is dying because they are going so over on that first Raw, and he's put this match together, and he is just like trying to get them to wrap it up, and then poor Abyss goes over to Bruce Pritchard and is profusely apologizing. Do they have those people not the Bruce Pritchards, but do they have those, Chris Parks, like putting matches together and making sure everything goes off safe and without a hitch? Or is that the talent that, you got this much time to do this, get out there and go
Well,
wild, guys?
See, that's why I think that, this is something that WWE could learn from AEW, is that there are multiple ways of doing it.
Sure.
WWE likes to talk about, whether it's the ID program, the performance center, you come and you learn WWE style, which
WWE's
means
way.
that
Yeah.
there is one way of doing things, and there's not. There's obviously not more than one. There's obviously more than one way of doing things, which is why sometimes when characters come to the WWE, they are not as you remember them or wish that they still were. That's because
Hmm.
they have to work a certain WWE style, and it does make things more formulaic. Again, that style can work. I just want to see that variety shown where, I mean, you do look at the top of the card in AEW, and if you think about who's the main event scene in AEW, MJF, Hangman Page, Will Ospreay, Swerve Strickland. These men are not just great characters; they're great workers.
Hmm.
Cody Rhodes is a solid worker. Jay Uso, a solid worker. They're good
Yeah.
characters. Roman Reigns, a good character. John Cena, a good character. They're not.
Hmm.
They work. Put them in the spots they're in. I like the stories that they can tell, but also mix it up. Back, not that long ago when Daniel Bryan at the time, worked his way to the
Hmm.
top of the card. Gunther made it to the top of the card. Punk and Rollins are at the top of the card. They can work that style, but they're very rarely the main event. They're often
Hmm.
underneath the guys who are the better characters, and that from the time of Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat opening up for Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. That's been the history of WWE, is that the characters
Hmm.
take precedence over the work rate. I understand that Dean Malenko isn't going to sell as much merch as Hulk Hogan. Probably not your main eventer, but these days there are many guys that show that they can do both, and I'd love to see more of those guys at the top of WWE at the end of the night and not in the middle stealing the show, or being the secondary champion, which Seth is compared to the other championship. But let's mix it up.
Mix it
Let's
up.
just
I
mix it
like
up.
it. Mix it up.
Because that is one thing. You can complain a lot about Tony, and you can complain the show's too darn long. But at the end of the show, you're going to have seen some matches that are absolutely going to be match of the year contenders. You don't always know that when you go into a WWE PLE.
Yeah, and I think the variety has been baked into AEW before it was even AEW. If you go all the way back to All In, like the original All In, and like what the Sears, whatever arena or whatever it was in Chicago, that was quite a wrestling variety show from top to bottom. You had a little bit of everything. You had some, wacky characters, and you just had everything in that, and I think that that's been baked into the DNA of AEW since day one. And really, I think the WWE style has been baked in, like we've talked about throughout this, since it was the WWF and the WWF. Yeah, that's right. So
Old habits can be hard to break.
yeah.
And let's face it, one of the things that made Tony Khan a wrestling fan was what he was watching on WWE. One of the things, though, that made Tony want to start a wrestling company is there are some things I can do differently than WWE. And give him
Hmm.
all the heck that you want for the things that he does wrong. And he does plenty wrong trying to be a one-man show. But there's a lot that Tony gets right. And as big as WWE are, they are not too big to pick up a few lessons from the competition. And hopefully they will.
Hmm. Until they run them out of business anyway. With all
What do
that
you
counter
all think?
programming.
Oh, all those
Yeah.
afternoon shows. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Pretty
Um,
soon we're gonna have things starting right after SmackDown on Friday nights, pre-shows.
well, they're going to start running NXT in the afternoons of the big shows in the evenings. So Tony's going to have breakfast pay-per-views. So,
Brunch with the stars.
everybody, there's room for all, and there's room for everyone to learn. We just picked three things that each could learn from each other. That is not the entirety of what WWE and AEW can
No,
learn
it's
from each
not.
other. Tell us what you think are things that these two promotions could do better if they paid attention to the competition and not just try to put the competition out of business. Let's get some teachable moments in the comments of this
Teachable
one, if you would.
moments. Let's do it. Play nice in the comments, y'all.
And with that, again, let us know what you think. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe, like. We appreciate you. Doug, next week,
Absolutely. Next week. What do we have
it,
next week,
we
Kevin?
we have a review of
What?
All Out, and it's
Oh,
also WrestlePalooza. Like there'll be a lot to break down
so
from next
much.
week.
So much wrestling going on. Folks, until then, you can't say there's not enough wrestling to watch, so go watch some wrestling. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.